big software projects, ERP and otherwise, have all kinds of risks and they're expensive and usually fail to meet their goals. They go over budget. I call myself a project fixer because we can de-risk them and improve the chances of success that don't necessarily follow the traditional playbook. One is we don't want to automate a bad process. That's like we have a broken car, we're going to speed it up and just run it into the ground faster. Or if this process loses us money, we can speed it up and lose money faster, right? None of that is a good idea.
How do I get this train back on the rails?
There's kind of four big pieces to this: people, process, data, and technology, right? And I would argue that they're kind of in that order.
Hey, Bob, so lovely to chat with you today. When we met at Disrupt HR in Windsor, I guess about a month and a half ago, it was so cool to listen to your talk. But one of the things I really want to talk about today is this concept of you being a project fixer. And so maybe you can tell us a little bit about why should somebody listen to you as a project fixer and what does that mean?
Sure. Well, Nancy, thank you so much for having me on your podcast, and it was really great to meet you at Windsor as well. And your talk was also awesome. Love the work that you do, helping leaders raise their EQ. I think that technical leaders in particular, much needed. So thank you for your work. Yeah. I've been playing with this idea of calling myself a project fixer because of the notion that sometimes the things that we do on projects that are sort of status quo, that are the sort of bread and butter of consultants and all of that, there is value in some of that, but some of it is status quo that produces the same results over and over again. And we know big software projects, ERP and otherwise, have all kinds of risks and they're expensive. And usually, they so often fail to meet their goals. They go over budget. So, I think there's some things that we can do to de-risk them and improve the chances of success that don't necessarily follow the traditional playbook. And often by the time somebody wants to ask about that, they're in the middle of a project that's gone sideways. So that's when the phone will ring and someone will say, "Hey, my project's in trouble. I've got a situation. Can you help?" But certainly I'm happy to come in upstream if I can and help de-risk things, right? There's no perfect trip. These things are complicated. And even when they go perfectly, they create some disruption and it's hard. If we can improve the chances of success, which often involves some prep or some course correction or whatever, that's what I'm aiming to do.
There are so many nuggets in there that I want to piece apart that we're going to dive into. One of the things that made me laugh was an ERP rollout that goes perfectly. Having
Sure.
done 3 SAP rollouts and the Microsoft tool and a couple others, I'm a chemical engineer, so IT is not ERPs are not my thing. But one of the things that I heard you say, and I think this is when people reach out to consultants incorrectly, is they wait until things are off the rails. And which makes perfect sense why you consider yourself the project fixer, because now things come in off the rails.
Sure.
And so what is it that would help somebody be like, okay, I need to engage somebody like Bob before the project starts, so I'm not in the fix and the how do I get this train back on the rails
Sure.
to move forward?
Sure. Yeah. So look, there's kind of four big pieces to this: people, process, data, and technology, right? And I would argue that they're kind of in that order. You could flip process and data, but number one is people. You have to have your best people on the project, the people that know the entire organization. It's a mistake, especially in a bigger organization, just to grab the people who are available. You want
Uh-huh.
the best people. And it's not easy to free those folks up, but that's critical. You also want the best people from your vendor. So, when I speak about this, I'll often say choosing the vendor is at least as important, maybe more important than technology, right? Particularly those bigger systems, they all work. They all work. So yeah, are there some puts and takes and fit, and compromises? Sure. Take a look at that stuff, negotiate whatever the best deal you can get, blah, blah, blah. But choosing the vendor that's going to put it in is absolutely critical. And you should interview the folks that are going to come on site, right? The pre-sales engineer is somebody you'll fall in love with, but they're great at their job, but that's probably not who's coming back to put your system in. So it's the best people inside, the best people outside. And then around process.
Can we pause there
Yeah.
before we
Yeah,
go on?
please.
Because as a people person,
Yeah.
right? As an introvert, I'm still a people person. One of the things that I learned in 2008 that became the most valuable skill, and it's something that I'm hearing you say, is when I was bidding turnarounds in the oil and gas industry, I actually told our contracting department that I was bidding based on people.
Uh,
And they looked at me like I had two heads. What are you thinking? The reality is the union rate for people is the same. The difference, and that will make the difference in my turnaround success, is the leadership team who's actually going to lead those people. And
sure.
if I can get the best leadership team, this project will go without any problem. So, what are some of the tips? And maybe we can we'll go into the 4 steps of your process,
Sure.
but I really kind of want to dive into this because I think it's the piece that people overlook the most in selecting. And let's start with the vendor and then let's talk about how do you free those great people? Because in an organization, I appreciate how difficult that is. So let's
Sure.
start with how do you go about what should they ask? What types of things should they consider?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So for the vendor, I mean, one is I think you want to know how big are they? How deep is their bench? It may be useful that they know your industry. I know a lot of people prefer that, and I think there are some industries where that kind of specific industry knowledge can really help and save you some time and money. But I would be more interested in knowing that this vendor has a deep bench, so that if you do get somebody that you think like this person doesn't seem to know it, or they're not a fit, or whatever the case, or something happens and they've lost trust or lost the confidence of the team, there's a deep bench there to swap people out. So I think that's really important. And then some bread and butter questions. How many times have you done this? What have you moved from our system to the new system more than once, to know some of those ins and outs. But I think that the talent and the skills and the fit of the people that you're bringing on are the things that I think matter most. And in that, bust out your job description, or rather your, your job interview questions that you would ask for any job in the organization, and cultural fit, and all the things, right?
Yeah, I think that's a great little tip, right? Use your interview tools that you would interview for somebody who's becoming part of your team and moving them forward. When
Yeah.
you look
And
in,
sorry, Nancy, let me jump in too and say,
yeah,
I think you've got to be doing that really early too, because of course the vendor has a pipeline and they're trying to schedule resources on a project timeline and everything else. So,
yeah,
they may be giving you the people that are available in the right time slot. And if you don't get far enough ahead of that, they can't flex either. It's not fair to ask them to pull
yes.
somebody off of another project.
Yes.
Right.
Running engineering teams from corporations, it's amazing how sometimes the length of time it takes them to make the decision. It's like, I can't keep those people just sitting there. So once you do that interview and that process, you do need to make that decision quick so that they can secure them, so that they can plan them in their pipeline. I think
That's right.
it's a very fair statement. I see that in project world all the time. The owner company thinks like, well, you should just be available. You and I know as coaches and consultants,
Right.
right? We have multiple people and we're trying to make sure that our docket is full and that
That's right.
our team's docket is full. So making those decisions quickly, but having those interviews is really critical. Now let's move to the people inside the company
Yeah.
because oftentimes, right, it becomes this pull between how do I keep the company running and how do I free these great talented people up to be able to execute this project, to be able to provide the right information so that you can do it correctly the first time. And so,
100%.
what are some of the tips or strategies that people should consider?
Yeah. Well, look, first of all, I would give a ton of grace around this topic, because I think especially the smaller the organization, the more difficult this is, right? So it's easy for me to sit here on a podcast and, chuck ideas out that I don't have to back up. So it's not easy. I think that especially in a smaller org, people are going to feel that pull and they're going to be wearing multiple hats, and you can't just pull people completely out of the day job. I do think you're wise to budget for some staff augmentation if you need to bring people in. But
Mhm.
again, those folks that you bring in probably should be doing the day job to backfill the day job and let the expert get on the project rather than the other way around. Now, if you need to bolster some expertise from outside for a variety of reasons, sure, go ahead and do that. But getting some extra capacity and some extra help, also anything that you can do, and well, this is a challenge because organizations want to go and succeed and be competitive in their marketplace, or competitive in the nonprofit space, whatever they're trying to do with their mission. But if you can shrink the priority list, right? Like this, you're going to do a big software project. It's got to be a high priority item, and other stuff needs to get sort of backburnered. And some people say, well, we're in the middle of a project and acquisition falls out of the sky. Okay, maybe we need to pause the project and go after that acquisition. Maybe you can do both, but it's tough, right? So again, just sort of that ruthless prioritization and trying to make space for the best people. And if you can't do that, question whether it's is this project really that important, or is now the right time for
Mhm.
the project? Maybe it's not. It's okay. My standard talk title for this stuff is cancel your ERP project, because I think there are a whole bunch of reasons not to do it, right? I mean,
Yeah, and one of the things I feel that leaders often misjudge is how much time it takes of their team to step on do these projects. Like I remember the first time I was on an SAP project, they actually canceled it and then came back 2 years later and redid it. And one of the things that was required for us was I live in Sarnia, we all had to go to Pittsburgh. And
Mhm.
so I was on a plane every Sunday night to
Yep.
Pittsburgh there
Yep.
and then fly back. And that team was designated to that for approximately 2.5 years. And they did pull like really talented technical people onto that team to make that work. But the reality is getting good at going, is this the right time to do this project?
Yeah.
Do we have the capacity? Is this a priority on our organization? Or so that you don't overpull people, so you don't overstrain people.
That's right.
So now that we've gone through the people portion, which I think we like talked at a high level, there's a lot more nuances.
There's a lot
People
more there.
that
I even want to mention, you just mentioned something important about the decision to cancel or go ahead,
Mhm.
so having a great sponsor and a great steering team that's behind this thing, and also maybe has a range of opinions, right? Because I think I think the hardest decision on the entire project is the go no go decision, right?
Yes.
Because some portion of the team is going to say we're not ready, right?
Yes.
Like, it's uncomfortable. We want it to be perfect. It's never going to be perfect, right? So you got to make a judgment call on, should we risk this disruption or not? And a lot of that has to do with really good experience calls, understanding the culture, understanding the risk of disruption that you can afford. If you're in manufacturing, do you have safety stock? All the things, right? Have we done all the things? But if the entire team is screaming at you, we're not ready, and it's a credible, talented team, then the decision is maybe easier, or at least simpler, maybe
Yes.
not easier, but simpler, which is, look, we got to pause, or we need to, we need to revisit whatever. So I do think that's very difficult. And so, y- you know, you don't always get to choose your steering team, but they play a huge role in this.
And having diverse perspective it's one of the things I'm trying to talk more and more about is the
Yeah,
importance of allowing diverse perspective. If you get too many yes people on your team, that's not that's not a good sign that you've got a good team who's going to do
that's right.
an exceptional job. There's also like these conversations though that at some point even if people are being somewhat disruptive and say this is not right, but the majority of the team and the sponsor says we are going ahead, then everybody needs to jump on board to make sure
That's right.
that
That's
that
right.
happens.
No, that's right. It's the the classic thing of like, hey, let's argue like crazy, and then and come to a consensus. And when we open the door, we're all on the same page. Yeah, no doubt, no doubt, that needs to be the case. And you're absolutely right. Projects can fail devastatingly, or have devastating disruption, if a track is, hey, it's green all the way out, where things are great, only they're not, right?
Right.
So you can also be in trouble if you're overly pessimistic, right? Like, I tend to be risk averse, so I have to catch myself going like, hey, is this a survivable risk? Is this a reasonable risk? Those kinds of things. But you got to balance that. And that's where, to your point about that sort of creative conflict, is critical. And you got to have room for that, and time for that.
Mhm. What's the next step? So you said people first.
Yep. So
Now
so
you've
I think,
said
process and data,
leaders.
and whatever order you want to take those in. My only points here, and I'm certainly not an expert in process or data. Like, if somebody said, hey, can you clean up our data? I can tell you that's critical. You want a data expert to clean up your data, right? But what I would say is this: I see lots of projects get derailed from people not knowing their processes. So it's not even, of course, you want to document your processes. That's useful going into the project. It can save some time, that, the vendor's going to want to interview you, all of your teams, on how the processes work and everything else. What's absolutely critical is that, all of the process and all of the edge cases and all right. So if you have to put more people in the room for those sessions, sometimes we have the business process owner and then we also have the subject matter experts that are part of that. You get everybody in there and really understand all of the ways that this needs to work, because invariably what happens is we give them 80% of the story. The vendor comes back with a solution that's 75 or 80%, right, meets those needs. And then we go, wait a minute, it doesn't do this, 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 and this. Or worse yet, we find that out in testing, nearer the end of the
Right.
project. But that kind of rework is not only expensive and costly in terms of dollars and timeline, but it can undermine the trust and credibility between the vendor and the customer, right? If the vendor thinks you're an idiot, that's not good. When you then later when you go, hey, we got a problem, and they're like, yeah, you guys know what you're talking about. Anyway, that's a bad look. And so I do think it's really important to maintain credibility with the vendor. I mean, yes, the customer's always right and all of that stuff,
Yes.
but you're gonna hit some spot in the project where you're asking for help,
Yes.
swapping somebody out, or we need a favor, or we got to renegotiate a timeline, or whatever it is. Don't give away that credibility with the vendor so easily. Anyway, and again, there's no perfect trip. I give all kinds of grace in this, but if you can really get your processes nailed down with the team and
Yeah.
really understand all the pieces and how they fit upstream and downstream, massive source of first pass yield.
Um, I think of, and whether people like him or not, Elon Musk talks about this really well about, you know what, figure out your process, then start to cut the pieces out of it. But before
Yes,
you automate it using a tool like an ERP system
that's
or
right.
any other computer system, whether you're moving and you're starting to use AI, right? If you don't have those processes really clearly developed, I think that was my favorite part of doing ERP work, was learning how to white paper processes out and how to
Sure.
pull those out of people so that we could get them all down in a row. Because until you know that, you can't automate it, and getting that clear. So, what's one of the things when I hear this, and maybe it's because I'm a process person, is yes,
Yeah.
my people are important, but even before I think I go down the path of investing in the ERP project, I feel like doing that process work ahead of time would make that project run like 100% better.
You are absolutely right. You're reading my mind because a couple things. Once you engage the vendor, the meter is running. So
Mhm.
yeah, if you need somebody to help you sort out the processes and you think that software vendor, that integrator, whoever it is the right person to help you with that, then great. Think about that as a separate expense. We're doing a business process mapping exercise, right? And
Right.
looking at some of that ahead of time. But if you want to do it yourself, why would you pay the vendor to sit in the room with you,
Yeah.
right? Like you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
Do that ahead of time. A couple reasons. One is we don't want to automate a bad process.
Right.
That's like, like we have a broken car, we're going to speed it up and just run it into the ground faster. Like we can,
Yes.
or if this process loses us money, we can speed it up and lose money faster, right? Like
Mhm.
none of that is a good idea.
Right.
Of course, the other thing is you want to be mindful that if you're going to completely nuke the process by putting in the new system, then yeah, maybe we should explore what the new process is going to look like. But I
Mhm.
also think there's a bit of a paradox there. Like you want to optimize your processes going into the new system, and there's going to be some things you have to compromise on. The system does it this way, and it's going to be expensive to do it differently, and some systems more so than others. I mean, SAP's
Yeah.
reputation is right. Like we got the ways that we do things, and it's fine.
Very
It
expensive.
can be a great fit. Well, it can be a great fit for some organizations to go like, yeah, we want to just do it the way the system tells us to do it. That's not the point of
Yes.
what we do, right? Other places you've got a secret sauce to your process and whatever the thing is. So where I'm going is I think you want to get that stuff organized, but certainly before the system goes in, but you also don't necessarily want to change more than you have to for go live, right? We're going to
Mhm.
be on a new system. There's going to be new ways of doing things. And so if it can be evolution rather than revolution, that might be a good idea, even though the vendor's telling you revolution, the ROI is based on revolution, right? But like, let's change as much as necessary, as little as possible, and then continue to invest and change it after we launch so that we haven't completely put people on the moon and asked them to try to behave normally.
It's I think that's the funniest thing that happens with ERP systems, right? Is we misjudge how long it takes for them, like the people who actually have to use it after we implement it
Sure.
to get it moving. So part of my feeling is that by understanding the processes beforehand and understanding the impact to people can also make the rollout of SAP or whatever ERP system you're using better. Because if they aren't able to connect the dots between the two spaces, it becomes really hard. It's like that change management process of getting people to
Yes.
actually use the system can be difficult.
Yes. Change management and training, right? I mean, both
Yeah.
absolutely massive. And there's a risk of underclubbing both. And the thing that I think the temptation with training is that it's this window at the end of the project. And we compress, as we compress, like, hey, we're trying to hit the go live date and the
Yep.
development's taking too long or testing or whatever's happened. We got some rework and we want to compress that training window. That can be an expensive decision in terms
Agree.
of your launch, right? I certainly can't take credit for this, but I was taught somewhere along the way about the aircraft carrier curve, which is, the when a plane, at least as I understand it, when a plane takes off from an aircraft carrier, it falls toward the water before it shoots up toward the sky. And that's totally normal. Same thing
Right.
on I think any system launch, you're going to have some disruption and a dip in productivity. It's going to happen. And so, our job as a vendor, as a consultant, as a project team, all working together is how shallow and how short can we make that dip, right? So I think you're exactly right. And training is a massive piece of that, right?
Yeah, getting everybody up to speed on whatever it is. And I know we're talking about all of this in relation to ERP systems, but this is true of any project.
I think
Doesn't
so.
matter how big or small. It doesn't matter if this is an IT project or a totally new redesigned car, right? Like these all have these pieces to them.
That's
So what's
exactly
the
right.
last piece? Because you talked about data and yeah, we need to make sure the data is clean and cleansed. Oh my gosh, that is a process.
Yeah.
Do you?
Yeah.
Before, but what's the last step in this
So,
process?
so I would argue technology comes last. I think
Yeah.
you've sorted out who are the people that we need here, who are our absolute rock stars that we need involved, and then sort out the process and data piece, right? And when you think your data's clean, keep cleaning. There's all of that, right? And then of course, until you choose the technology, you probably don't know in terms of data mapping and some of those pieces,
Yes.
right? But at least getting the data clean and understanding what's there and making sure that we like what we have and data is an asset and all that good stuff. And then, yeah, there may be some conversion or other things that have to happen. We find out our part numbers are too long and we decide to deal with that or whatever, right? I think that's probably
Yes.
less and less the case these days as the systems get better and better at this. But nonetheless, my argument is that technology is the last decision. You do all these other things and then you go shopping for a system or, some sort of parallel work there because again, generally they all work. They all have their pros and cons, all those pieces, right? And there's different tiers and all the things. But I just, I think just trying to make the point that the system is only part of the equation. We don't want to just sort of overshoot on like the technology is going to do this. The system's gonna save us. The system's going to do. No. This is about people and process and data, and the
Yeah.
system is a tool, and let's choose the right tool for the job. But that might come last.
And I think that's a smart way to do it, right? I figured out my people, we've reviewed the process, we've reviewed the data. Now that we've got this pre-work done, we're ready to make that decision. We're ready to
That's right.
say what it is. And often I see projects do it backwards. They choose the system and then and figure out the rest of
Yeah,
the
or
piece.
some variation of that, right? It's like we've done a little bit of that work or whatever, or
Right.
we've got a small team doing it. Like if you get the whole team sorted in the process and all the pieces, then that same team can be really, really smart about how they evaluate the system options and what's going on, right? You get all kinds of great input from those folks. And they're already thinking about process and other things, right? So,
Yes.
and I think my argument would be, and you've seen a lot of this too, like the project's going to take that same amount of time. Like whether you do the pre-work first and then go select and start the meet, right? You go like, well, that's going to take
Yes.
long. Well, it's probably the same amount of time net, but you've got the meter running for a shorter amount of that time, so it costs you less.
I think the challenge is, and this is my experience being in the corporate world in making these decisions, right? Is that when you go to get money, whether the company's got a big gating process or they're a small company, they don't think about the money in relation to those front pieces that you're proposing to do.
Sure.
And so they don't think about them until they're like, okay, we're going to sign the contract and get this company. And then we consider it all in that bucket. And I think one of the things I'm hearing you say is you need to start the project and start the funding for that project before you almost know the price of the tool that you're going to use.
Well, it's an interesting point. I mean, I've certainly seen organizations do kind of a pre-funding, like, hey, we're asking for an initial sum of money to get ready kind of thing,
Yeah. Yeah.
and that's not I don't think that's a crazy idea at all, especially in a larger organization.
Mhm.
I think a lot of what we're talking about though can be done with the existing team. It's more just a
Right.
question of, hey, let's be deliberate and let's call out some specific goals and some specific activities that
Mm.
this team can do around we're getting the team in place, getting processes sorted out, looking at data, all those things. And yeah, if you need to engage some outside help, you may need to get some funding for that.
Yeah.
But if that's internal work, it's just let's do that before we go vendor shopping and before we start the meter running with the
Mhm.
vendor, if we know there's some things we want to clean up first.
Yeah. As a consultant who specializes in this area, do you help teams like get themselves out of the weeds once they're off the track?
I mean, I think it's it's a bit bespoke in terms of how the process goes, right? And maybe that's just
Yeah.
my own bias. I have in the Clifton Strengths world, I have individualization in my top 5. So
Mhm.
I like to really tailor what I'm doing to the people or the team or the organization. So I also love cleaning up messes. So I'm happy to
Yeah.
happy to jump in any situation and try to help. But look, it really depends. I mean, it's often a combination of things, and it might be sometimes it can be a really simple thing. It maybe not easy, maybe a hard conversation or a hard thing to sort of raise up and say, hey, this is what's going on. But sometimes it just takes somebody coming in from the outside to say, well, hey, I can see this, right? I'm looking at this with fresh set of eyes. I see what's going on here, or I've seen this at other places. And look, it's a batting average. So we're from the consulting world too. We don't always get it right either. But yeah, I think it's about trying to see what's going on across those areas. Do we have a people issue inside or outside? Do we
Mhm.
have a so as such, maybe it's a vendor issue outside. Do we have a process issue? We've got, we've got a project governance issue. Like what is going on? What is the problem? Or did we just have bad expectations up front, right? Did we take the vendor's project plan and go, great, they said 12 months, it's going to be 12 months on the dot? Never is. I mean, the old project management adage about, double the number and raise the units up one level, right? I mean, there is some truth. There's a reason that saying exists, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So
It's a funny truth that take the budget, double it, right? Like those things happen. One of the things that I learned, and this became the most powerful tool, and I think it goes back to your first bit about people, was once I had people aligned around the process and the expectation, things like we were able to execute things, we were able to make decisions quickly,
that's right.
we were able to do that. And I think people don't value that enough. Value that, getting that alignment, getting that, having those disagreement arguments that we talked about at the
Sure.
start, and then being like, okay, let's be on the same page and move it forward. And it's interesting. There's an organization called I think it's ATS Networks, and they evaluate turnarounds. But you could apply this to projects. And
Sure.
turnarounds are like they feel like an ERP project, except we don't have 12 months to do it. You got 30 days, get in,
Right.
get out, and a
Right.
thousand people. But the thing they taught me was you have all of your procedures and your processes and all of the things that you do, and then you have your alignment of those. And when they evaluated mine, they were like, "Yeah, you're in deep trouble." And I knew it because I had received the project way too late in the
Yeah.
game to do. And I was like, "What is the one thing I can do?" And they're like, "If you can get alignment, you will have a better chance of being on budget and on target."
Sure.
And so I really spent a lot of time around that alignment bit. And once I got that, we were able to execute the project 5 million under budget and on time.
Wow.
And so it's really powerful when people take that and put that in. And so when I hear you talk about people and that being that first place, people and then plan and then data and then technology in that order. To me, that's because once you get that alignment, you can get traction, people will move.
Yeah,
faster.
I think that's very well said, and I I I tend to be on the side of folks that talent wins, right? I mean, I
Mhm.
kind of grew up in a talent based organization, and I recognize there's limits to that. You still need expertise. I mean, I'm not trying to be extreme or naive about that, but I do think talent makes a huge difference, and to your point, if we're not aligned, if we're not all rowing in the same direction, if we're not clear on what a win is, that's a huge problem, right? So I think that's very well said. And we didn't talk about specifically choosing a project manager
Mm.
or a project, a project leadership
Yeah.
team, a project management team that's going to lead the project, but somebody that's well respected in the organization. There was some research some years ago that suggested that organizational tenure and the ability to spot and manage risk might be much more important than experience having done an ERP before, for example. So, thinking about
Yeah.
who you're choosing, because again, that person's ability to drive alignment. And a lot of times, I think, especially in medium and large organizations, the project manager's job is people. It's
Yes.
not it's not spreadsheets and Gantt charts and all the things, right? Like they probably have an assistant helping them with that stuff. So again, choosing the right person for the right job. What is the project manager job going to be? But to your point, that the alignment piece I think is huge, and probably back to your question about even coming into a turnaround situation or a project in trouble. It's like, okay, what's a win here? I mean, are we trying to decide whether or not to even go forward? Or are we
Mhm.
trying to decide how to save our go live date? Are we trying to pick a new go live date and avoid spending too much more money? Or what problem are we trying to solve? Which is a question I love to ask anyway, right?
Well, and sometimes it's like, are we cutting the scope?
That's exactly right.
Right? In ERP systems, they can be as complex as you want them to be,
That's
or they
right.
can be as simple as you want them to be. And it may be, we're just going through with the accounting portion. And then we'll add the
Yes,
operations portion onto it, and then the maintenance portion and the HR portion, right?
that's right.
It could be, let's just do one piece, get that done, and then layer it on and make those decisions early as you process. Because sometimes I see people, we're just going to jump all in and
Yeah.
do everything.
That's right. Well, and that's I mean, there's a couple things there. Certainly, an approach worth considering is a module
Mhm.
by module implementation. I had
Yeah.
a colleague that I met in a professional organization who was 1000% in that camp. He said, on paper, it's going to look more expensive. And of
Right.
course, you have all this, this temporary integration work that you're going to throw away later if you go module by
Yes.
module. But he said, he's a firm believer that de-risks things in a way that is very predictable, and you'll spend the same amount of money or less, same timeline or less in the end. So I think it's always a reasonable approach to consider. And if your vendor is talking about helping you scope a minimum viable product, that's a green light to, like that's a good thing, right? Add that to the plus column if they're talking about MVP and what that looks like, which is sort of what I was getting at about the how much process change do you bite off, right? Like what is our minimum
Yep.
viable product that gets us where we need to be? Now, another piece that plays into scope management and change management and all of those things is, are you committed to continuing to invest in this system
Mm.
after you go live, right? And everybody says that. And then if the go live is painful and expensive, or there's other things, now we've got all this pent up demand from other projects in the company that we've got to continue to do. Sometimes that second phase doesn't come, or it doesn't come very quickly. And if you have people in your organization that have seen that movie before, they're going to fight to the death to get the stuff they want in phase one. So
Yes.
you really like it. I recommend this all the time. Like have a PMO built, and or whatever you want to call it, but some way that if we're throwing scope overboard, we're throwing stuff into future phases. We've got real money set aside. We've got leaders up there saying, folks, we are going to continue to invest. We are going to have a process to prioritize these things. We will make smart investments if they have good ROI. That gives people confidence then to go, okay, I can let this go for now, right? I don't need to die
Yeah.
on this hill right now, as long as I know it's going to come in the next 24 months or whatever. I think that's a huge deal, because if that's an empty promise and people don't believe it, your scope is going to be a mess.
Oh my gosh. Bob, there's so many things I want to talk to you about in this process. I want to step back for a moment and dive a little deeper into the project manager, because you raised that. And you're right. We have not talked about that and the value of that, and that the project manager is the people person. It's interesting. This morning, I was coaching a group of engineers on communication skills. And one of them was talking about how he stepped into a new role as a project manager in this group, and they are very much in the IT world. And I think it's for military IT is what they do. So very strict on like keeping all of that
Mhm.
information.
Mhm.
And we're talking about it, and he was, so tell me about your role, right? And he was talking about, oh, well, I got to keep budget, and he was doing all the tasks. And
Yeah.
are you a contributor level project manager or are you a leader project manager?
Right.
And he was, I don't understand what's the difference, but it's, are you helping people be successful?
Right.
I'm wondering if you can just take a little bit more time and share what you see works really well in a project manager for an ERP upgrade.
Sure. I mean, first, let me say there are a lot smarter people in the world about project management than I am. And I am
Mhm.
personally not wired to be a great contributor project manager. I'd be a good sort of people leader project manager. But if there's
Yeah.
not somebody else there that has the self-discipline to make sure the spreadsheets are updated, like I like doing that stuff and then I get off track on it. So I just want to be above board of my own
Yeah.
limitations there. Uh, but um, yeah, look, I think you're exactly right about differentiating, and maybe this is back to my individualization and sort of that talent based approach. But what do we need out of our project manager, right? As I mean, part of the project prep too is figuring out, okay, what's the governance? Governance sometimes is this very bureaucratic, corporate word, whatever. But like, really, like, what are the, what like? Let's build the responsibility matrix around what's the steering company or steering committee doing, rather. What's the vendor doing? What's the internal team doing? What do we need from the project manager, right? Or what do we need from the project management team? I mean, you don't have to be very big before you really want two or three people that are sort of at the core of the thing. And and how do we carve that up? Or if I would even be okay sort of iterating on that based on the people. So if you've got somebody that like, hey, this person is a great leader in the organization, they could drive this thing forward, but and they're trusted and their ability to spot risk and they've got great intuition and their attention to detail is crap. Okay, well then let's get another person who we can two in the box who's got fantastic attention to detail and will, be making sure all the I's are out and the T's are crossed and, all the things, right? So I kind of love that two in a box or three in a box approach. And maybe, if you've got somebody driving change management, if you've got somebody that's going to be driving training and testing, like those might be your core sort of like, hey, we've got three or four people that represent the core project management office for this project. And then there's the broader team. And that's again, not to the exclusion of anybody, but I think sometimes carrying that load as a small nucleus can be better than just trying to do it, one person doing it.
This has been such a wonderful conversation, Bob. For anybody who wants to know a little bit more about Bob Wallace, he is a strategist, consultant, and creative leader who makes complex ideas not just clear, but surprisingly fun to engage with. Drawn both from decades in business and music, and hopefully I'll get him back on and we can talk about music and all kinds of other fun things. He combines analytical precision with an intuitive feeling for people and timing. Whether he's helping a team find clarity in chaos or dropping a well timed dad joke to keep the room awake. And we actually started with a little joke that's not recorded. Bob's aim is the same: turn insight into action and make learning something people actually enjoy. For those of you who are also looking for a speaker, Bob mixes calm with authority, with a dry wit and a storyteller's sense of rhythm. And I have definitely heard him do that. His talks explore project success, leadership, talent, development, collaboration, and adaptive strategies with equal parts of substance and humor, reminding audiences that serious progress doesn't have to feel so serious. People walk away sharper, lighter, and more confident with clarity, trust, and a bit of laughter that can move any team forward. Bob, this has been so wonderful having you on Engineering Better Conversations, where we are here to help project leaders of all different disciplines be able to execute projects through people, through all of the items necessary better. Bob, is there one last thing that people should know about you that we haven't covered that you just want to leave them with?
That's very kind. Well, Nancy, first of all, thank you again for having me on, and I love what you're doing with this podcast and your work and helping us all be better at what we do. I think I am genuinely in this to help. I left full time work and got in consulting because I love learning about new organizations and genuinely trying to help make things better. And as you heard in my bio, I mean, I really try to make it actionable and insightful and the pros and cons of being a solopreneur. But I try to really give people what they need. If you need a half hour, you get a half hour. If you need a year, we can talk about a year. But that's it's really my aim is genuinely to try to be helpful here. So like you, I appreciate what you're doing because, we're trying to help here.
Awesome. If somebody was trying to get a hold of you, what's the number one way to do that?
Sure. You can find me on LinkedIn or you can hit me up on my website, which is 61keysllc.com. And there's contact info, scheduling info, all the things. So thank you.
Uh, Bob's information will be in the show notes below. So if you are looking at starting your ERP system, looking at upgrading your ERP system, right? Maybe you're adding a new part to it. Reach
Absolutely.
out to Bob because maybe before you start, you can keep yourself on track without needing a fixer to come in and help you get it back on the rails. My name is Nancy Michieli, and this is Bob Wallace, and it's been lovely to have you here today. If you find this helpful, please share it with somebody who you know is developing an ERP system.